Hey Reddit, I never thought I'd be posting here, but I guess that's where life has taken me. My name's Stan, and I'm 35. My wife, Lucy, and I have been together since high school. She was my rock, my best friend, and honestly, the love of my life. We've been through everything together: college, crappy jobs, and finally building a stable, happy life. At least, that's what I thought. About 6 months ago, Lucy landed her dream job at this high-end law firm in the city. It was a huge deal for her, she worked so hard for it, and I couldn't have been prouder. But not long after she started, things began to shift. Lucy's always been warm and grounded, but lately, it feels like she's been slipping away. She started coming home late, saying work was crazy busy. At first, I didn't think much of it. New job, new responsibilities, right? But then she started canceling our date nights. We used to have a standing Friday dinner, just us, no matter what. Now it's always, sorry Stan, I have to work late, or the team's going out for drinks, I can't miss it. I tried to be understanding. I really did. I figured it was just part of climbing the corporate ladder. But then little things started to bother me. She became more distant, glued to her phone at all hours, smiling at messages she wouldn't share with me. Our conversations got shorter, like I was a distraction from something more important. And then there were the new names she dropped, people I'd never heard of. Jake, some colleague who really gets her, and Marie, her mentor who's apparently a big shot at the firm. Lucy would rave about how much they'd taught her and how they encouraged her to think bigger. I didn't like the sound of it, but I didn't say anything. I didn't want to be that guy. But the tipping point came last Friday. She was out with her coworkers again, and I decided to check her location on my phone. I know it's not the most trusting thing to do, but something just didn't sit right. She wasn't at the office or even a work dinner like she said, she was at a bar across town. Alone with Jake and Marie, all right, so after sitting at home stewing over Lucy's location, I decided I needed to see what was going on. Maybe it was innocent, I told myself. Maybe I was just overthinking. But I couldn't shake the feeling in my gut that something wasn't right. So, I got in my car and drove to the bar. When I got there, I spotted her right away. She was sitting in a corner booth with Jake and Marie. From the doorway, I could see Lucy laughing, her head tilted slightly as Jake leaned in, talking close to her ear. She looked different. Happier, maybe. Or more alive. I don't know. But it wasn't the Lucy I saw at home lately, the one who was tired and too busy to talk. I stood there for a second, trying to decide what to do. Then, Marie noticed me. She nudged Lucy, who turned her head, and her face dropped the moment she saw me. She quickly recovered, plastering on a smile, but I caught that initial reaction. Jake, meanwhile, just gave me this casual once-over, like I was nobody worth noticing. I walked over, trying to keep calm. Hey Lucy. Funny running into you here. Oh hey Stan, she said, all cheerful like she hadn't just been caught. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing, I replied, trying to keep my tone light. I thought you were working late? She shifted uncomfortably, but before she could answer, Marie cut in. Stan, isn't it? Lucy's told us all about you. I'm Marie. She extended a hand like this was all perfectly normal. I shook it stiffly. Nice to meet you. This is Jake, Lucy added quickly, her voice overly bright. We were just going over some ideas for a case. In a bar. I asked, glancing at the drinks on the table. Lucy had a cocktail, Jake a beer, and Marie a glass of wine. It didn't exactly scream work meeting. Marie smirked and leaned back. We find the environment helps loosen up creative thinking. I didn't like her tone, but I turned my attention back to Lucy. You could have mentioned this. I was worried about you. Lucy's face flushed, and she avoided my eyes. I didn't think it was a big deal. Jake finally spoke up, his voice smooth and confident. Hey man, don't be too hard on her. We were just trying to blow off some steam after a rough week. The way he said it, like he was defending her, made my skin crawl. I looked back at Lucy, who still wouldn't meet my eyes. You coming home soon? I asked her. My voice was steady, but my hands were clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. Yeah, she said after a moment. Let me just finish my drink. Take your time, I replied coldly. Then I turned and walked out. I didn't trust myself to stay. Driving home, my mind was racing. Was I making too much of this? Or was it as bad as it seemed? Something about Jake's smug demeanor and Lucy's reaction didn't sit right with me. And Marie's whole broadening horizons vibe felt like code for something I didn't want to imagine. I don't know what's happening to my marriage, but I'm starting to feel like I'm the only one still trying to hold it together, alright? So after sitting at home stewing over Lucy's location, I decided I needed to see what was going on. Maybe it was innocent, I told myself. Maybe I was just overthinking. But I couldn't shake the feeling in my gut that something wasn't right. So, I got in my car and drove to the bar. When I got there, I spotted her right away. She was sitting in a corner booth with Jake and Marie. From the doorway, I could see Lucy laughing, her head tilted slightly as Jake leaned in, talking close to her ear. She looked different. Happier, maybe. Or more alive. I don't know. But it wasn't the Lucy I saw at home lately, the one who was tired and too busy to talk. I stood there for a second, trying to decide what to do. Then, Marie noticed me. She nudged Lucy, who turned her head, and her face dropped the moment she saw me. She quickly recovered, plastering on a smile, but I caught that initial reaction. Jake, meanwhile, just gave me this casual once-over, like I was nobody worth noticing. I walked over, trying to keep calm. "Hey, Lucy. Funny running into you here." "Oh, hey, Stan," she said, all cheerful like she hadn't just been caught. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "I thought you were working late?" She shifted uncomfortably, but before she could answer, Marie cut in. "Stan, isn't it? Lucy's told us all about you. I'm Marie." She extended a hand like this was all perfectly normal. I shook it stiffly. "Nice to meet you. This is Jake," Lucy added quickly, her voice overly bright. "We were just going over some ideas for a case. In a bar." I asked, glancing at the drinks on the table. Lucy had a cocktail, Jake a beer, and Marie a glass of wine. It didn't exactly scream work meeting. Marie smirked and leaned back. "We find the environment helps loosen up creative thinking." I didn't like her tone, but I turned my attention back to Lucy. "You could have mentioned this. I was worried about you." Lucy's face flushed, and she avoided my eyes. "I didn't think it was a big deal." Jake finally spoke up, his voice smooth and confident. "Hey man, don't be too hard on her. We were just trying to blow off some steam after a rough week." The way he said it, like he was defending her, made my skin crawl. I looked back at Lucy, who still wouldn't meet my eyes. "You coming home soon?" I asked her. My voice was steady, but my hands were clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. Yeah," she said after a moment. "Let me just finish my drink." "Take your time," I replied coldly. Then I turned and walked out. I didn't trust myself to stay. Driving home, my mind was racing. Was I making too much of this? Or was it as bad as it seemed? Something about Jake's smug demeanor and Lucy's reaction didn't sit right with me. And Marie's whole broadening horizons vibe felt like code for something I didn't want to imagine. I don't know what's happening to my marriage, but I'm starting to feel like I'm the only one still trying to hold it together. When Lucy came home that night, I was already sitting in the living room, nursing a drink. I'd been running through the confrontation at the bar over and over, trying to figure out if I'd overreacted. But every time I pictured Jake leaning in close to her or Marie's smug little smirk, my blood boiled all over again. She walked in, quiet, almost tiptoeing, like she hoped I wouldn't notice. But when she saw me waiting, her face tightened. "Hey," she said, setting her purse down on the counter. "Why are you still up?" "Couldn't sleep," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Figured we should talk." Lucy hesitated. "About what?" I raised an eyebrow. "Really? You don't think there's anything we need to discuss?" Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she looked away, busying herself with straightening the mail pile on the counter. "Stan, it was just a work thing. You didn't have to show up and make it awkward." "Awkward?" I repeated, incredulous. "Lucy, I thought you were working late. Instead, I find you at a bar, laughing with Jake like you don't have a husband waiting at home." She sighed, finally turning to face me. "It wasn't like that, okay? We were unwinding after a hard week. You're making it sound like something it's not." "Then what is it, Lucy?" I asked, standing now, unable to keep the frustration out of my voice. Because from where I was standing, it didn't look like work. It looked like you were enjoying yourself with Jake a little too much. Her eyes flashed with anger. You're being paranoid. Jake's just a friend and a colleague. I can't believe you don't trust me. It's not about trust, I shot back, though even as I said it, I wasn't sure it was true. It's about you acting like our marriage is an afterthought. You cancel date nights, you barely talk to me anymore, and now this? What am I supposed to think? She crossed her arms defensively. Maybe you're supposed to trust that I'm not doing anything wrong. Maybe you're supposed to understand that I have a demanding job and sometimes I need to blow off steam. God, Stan, not everything is about you. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Not everything is about me. Lucy, I've been here, supporting you through everything, and I'm telling you something feels off. If that doesn't matter to you, then maybe nothing does. She opened her mouth like she was about to say something, then closed it again. Finally, she just shook her head. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. She walked past me, and I stood there, too stunned to follow. Her coldness, her deflection, it all felt like she was hiding something. I sat back down and stared at my drink, wondering what the hell had happened to us. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I checked her phone, something I'd never done before. But it was locked. She had added a password recently, which was another red flag I hadn't paid attention to until now. I felt sick. The woman who used to trust me with everything was now keeping secrets. And I didn't know if I had the strength to figure out what they were the next morning. Lucy was already gone by the time I woke up. Her side of the bed was cold, and the house felt eerily quiet. It was Saturday, so I knew she wasn't at work, not officially anyway. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter, went for a run. Be back later. That was the thing about Lucy, she never used to go for morning runs. This was another new Lucy behavior that didn't sit right with me. But what could I do? Confront her for exercising? I tried to shake it off and went about my morning. I cleaned up around the house, made coffee, and tried to focus on something else. But my mind kept drifting back to the night before. The way she dismissed me, the new password on her phone, and how she didn't even try to reassure me, it all added up to something I couldn't ignore. By noon, Lucy still wasn't home. I texted her, "Hey, everything okay?" Her reply came about 20 minutes later, "All good. Just grabbing coffee with Marie." Marie. Of course. I couldn't even tell if she was lying anymore or if Marie was genuinely enabling her. Either way, my gut told me there was more to this coffee than she let on. When Lucy finally came home in the early afternoon, she was carrying a shopping bag and a cup of coffee, her cheeks flushed like she'd had a great time. She smiled at me like nothing was wrong. "Hey," she said, setting her bag down. "How's your morning been?" "Fine," I replied, keeping my tone casual. "How was your run?" She hesitated, just for a second. "Good." I ran into Marie, so we decided to grab coffee. "Right," I said. "So what's in the bag?" "Oh, just a new blouse I saw while we were out," she said quickly. "Why?" "No reason," I said, shrugging. "Just curious." She seemed relieved and went upstairs to put her things away. But I wasn't convinced. Something about her story didn't add up, and I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach. Later that day, I decided to do something I never thought I'd have to do. I installed a tracking app on her phone. I hated myself for it, but I needed answers. If she wasn't going to tell me the truth, I had to find it myself. The app worked silently in the background, syncing with her location and sending updates to my phone. I told myself it was temporary, just until I could get to the bottom of things. But as I set it up, I couldn't shake the guilt gnawing at me. What if I was wrong? What if she really was just overwhelmed with work and I was sabotaging our marriage with my insecurities? But then I remembered the way she laughed with Jake at the bar, and the guilt was drowned out by the cold, hard need for clarity. That night, Lucy was on her phone again, sitting on the couch next to me while we watched a show. She wasn't paying attention though, her fingers were moving quickly over the screen, and every so often, she'd smirk or let out a quiet laugh. "Who's that?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Just Marie," she said without looking up. "She sent me something funny. Can I see?" She hesitated, her hand instinctively pulling her phone closer. Then she laughed nervously. "It's a work thing, you wouldn't get it." I nodded slowly, trying not to let my frustration show. "Okay." Inside though, I was seething. If it was really nothing, why couldn't she just show me? I told myself to be patient, that the tracker would give me answers soon enough. But the truth was, I wasn't sure I wanted to know what I'd find. The tracker pinged me for the first time late the next afternoon. Lucy had told me she was running errands, but her location showed she was parked outside a trendy restaurant downtown, the kind of place we used to go to on our anniversaries. My stomach twisted. I tried not to jump to conclusions. Maybe she was meeting Marie, or even a client. There could have been a dozen innocent reasons for her to be there. But something about the timing, and the fact that she hadn't mentioned it, didn't sit right with me. I decided to drive over. I told myself it wasn't a spy, just to reassure myself that everything was fine. But as I parked my car a block away and spotted Lucy through the restaurant window, all those reassurances evaporated. She was sitting at a small table near the back, not with Marie or any other colleague, but with Jake. He was leaning forward, his hand resting casually on the table between them. Lucy looked radiant. She was laughing, tucking her hair behind her ear in that way she does when she's nervous or flustered. I stayed in my car, watching from a distance, my heart pounding in my chest. The longer I sat there, the angrier I got. She had lied to me again. Maybe they weren't doing anything explicitly wrong, but this wasn't just errands. It wasn't nothing. I wanted to march in there and confront them, but I stopped myself. A scene wouldn't solve anything. Instead, I waited until Lucy got home. "How were your errands?" I asked casually as she walked through the door. "Fine," she said, not looking at me. "I got a lot done." "That's good," I replied. "What did you do?" "Oh, just some shopping and stuff," she said vaguely, heading to the kitchen. "Nothing exciting." I followed her, my tone calm but pointed. "Funny, I thought I saw you downtown by that new restaurant. Looked like you were having a pretty good time." Her face froze for a second before she turned around, forcing a smile. "Oh, that. Yeah, I ran into Jake, and we decided to grab lunch." I didn't think it was worth mentioning. "Didn't think it was worth mentioning?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "You didn't think it was worth telling me you were having lunch with him instead of running errands?" "Stan, you're blowing this out of proportion," she said, exasperated. "Jake's a colleague. We talk about work, that's all. There's nothing going on. Then why lie about it?" I asked, stepping closer. "If it's so innocent, why not just tell me?" "I didn't lie," she snapped. "I just didn't think it mattered. Do I need to give you a play-by-play of my day now?" "I don't know, Lucy," I said bitterly. "Maybe just enough so I don't have to find out you're hanging out with another guy from a tracker app." Her eyes widened, and for the first time, she looked genuinely angry. "You tracked me? Are you serious right now?" "Yeah, I did," I admitted. "Because I don't trust you anymore. You've been lying to me, canceling plans, and spending all your time with Jake and Marie. How am I supposed to feel?" "This is insane," she said, throwing up her hands. "You're the one spying on me, but I'm the bad guy? You're paranoid, Stan. Maybe you should take a look at yourself before accusing me of anything." She stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the bedroom door behind her. I stood there, shaking, the weight of her words sinking in. Was I paranoid? Or was she gaslighting me into thinking I was? That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying the scene in my head, her words cutting deeper every time. Maybe I had crossed a line with the tracker. But if she was innocent, why was she so defensive? I had more questions than ever, and I was starting to wonder if I really wanted the answers. The morning after our argument, Lucy acted like nothing had happened. She greeted me with a chipper "good morning," as if the tension in our house wasn't thick enough to cut with a knife. I barely responded, still replaying her defensiveness over lunch with Jake. For the first time, I wasn't just suspicious, I was angry. Angry at her for lying, for brushing off my feelings, and for making me question my own sanity. That evening, I decided to get to the bottom of things. Lucy was in the shower, her phone on the kitchen counter. It was locked, of course, but I noticed a notification pop up, a text from Jake. It said, "Let's talk tomorrow, after work. Marie thinks it's time." I stared at it, my heart pounding. Time for what? My mind immediately went to the worst-case scenario. Before I could think it through, I grabbed a pen and jotted down Jake's number from the notification. I had no plan, no idea what I was doing, but I couldn't just let this slide. The next day, Lucy was out early, claiming she had an important meeting. I waited until I was alone, then called Jake's number. When he picked up, I tried to keep my voice steady. "Hey Jake. It's Stan. Lucy's husband." There was a long pause, then a chuckle that made my blood boil. Stan? What's up? I wanted to talk about yesterday, I said, forcing myself to sound calm. You and Lucy at lunch. Oh, that, he said, his tone infuriatingly casual. Look, man, Lucy and I work together. That's it. I don't know what she's told you, but there's nothing going on, all right? You sure about that? I pressed, my anger bubbling to the surface. Because I'm starting to think there's more to it. Listen, Jake said, his tone shifting to something colder. I don't know what your deal is, but maybe you should talk to Lucy instead of calling me. We're just co-workers. End of story. He hung up before I could respond, leaving me gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. His dismissive tone, the way he didn't deny anything outright, it only fueled my suspicions. That night, I decided to confront Lucy again, but I wanted proof this time. The tracker app showed her at another bar, this time with both Jake and Marie. I decided to drive there, determined to see what was really going on. When I arrived, I parked a block away and walked toward the bar. Through the window, I spotted them sitting at a table near the back. They weren't doing anything inappropriate, just talking and laughing, but the ease between Lucy and Jake was undeniable. And then Marie leaned in, saying something that made Lucy nod seriously. Whatever they were discussing seemed important, almost secretive. I couldn't take it anymore. I marched inside, my heart pounding, and approached their table. The three of them looked up, startled. Stan, Lucy said, her voice sharp with surprise. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing, I replied, my gaze shifting between the three of them. What's this all about? Marie spoke first, her tone calm but condescending. Stan, this isn't what it looks like. We're discussing work, that's all. Work, I repeated, narrowing my eyes at Lucy. You always seem to be working when you're with Jake. Lucy's face flushed, and she stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Stan, you're making a scene. Am I? I said, my voice rising. Or am I finally asking the questions you don't want to answer? Let's step outside, Jake said, standing as well, his tone firm. We don't need to do this here. I ignored him, my attention fixed on Lucy. Tell me the truth, Lucy. Are you cheating on me? The room seemed to go silent, all eyes on us. Lucy's face crumpled, but she didn't answer. The lack of denial felt like a punch to the gut. I turned and left before I could do or say something I'd regret. But as I walked back to my car, her silence echoed in my mind, louder than any word she could have said. I didn't sleep that night. Lucy came home late, well after I'd already locked up and turned off the lights. I heard her moving around downstairs, but didn't bother going to talk to her. What was the point? Her silence at the bar had said more than any excuse she could have given me. The next morning, Lucy approached me cautiously as I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept either. Stan, she began, her voice soft. We need to talk. I didn't look up. Now you want to talk? After last night. She sighed, pulling out the chair across from me and sitting down. I'm sorry about last night. I should have said something, but I didn't know how. How about the truth? I shot back, finally meeting her eyes. Are you cheating on me, Lucy? Her lips parted, but no words came out at first. Then she shook her head. No, Stan. I'm not cheating on you. Then what's going on? I pressed. Why all the secrecy? Why is Jake always involved? And what was Marie talking about when she said it's time? Lucy flinched at that, and her hands fidgeted in her lap. It's complicated. Try me, I said, my patience wearing thin. She took a deep breath, her eyes darting around the room like she was searching for an escape. Finally, she said, Marie's been pushing me to take on more responsibility at work. She thinks I've been holding myself back, and Jake's been helping me navigate that. I frowned. That's what all these late nights and secret meetings are about? Work. Yes, she said quickly, but her tone didn't convince me. Marie's unconventional. She believes in pushing boundaries, and she's encouraged me to broaden my network. Broadening your network by spending all your free time with Jake? I asked, my voice dripping with skepticism. Come on, Lucy. You expect me to buy that? She bristled. It's not like that. Jake and I are friends, and he's been a great mentor in his own way. Mentor? I scoffed. You've barely been there 6 months, and suddenly he's your guiding light? Lucy stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You don't get it, Stan. This job is everything I've worked for. I'm finally being seen, being valued, and instead of supporting me, you're trying to tear me down. I'm not trying to tear you down, I said, standing to face her. I'm trying to figure out why the woman I married is disappearing right in front of me. You're not the same, Lucy. This isn't you. She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. Maybe this is me. Maybe I've been holding myself back because I was afraid of what you'd think. But I can't do that anymore. Her words hit me like a freight train. So what are you saying? That I'm holding you back? No, Stan, she said, her voice trembling. I'm saying I need you to trust me. To let me figure out who I am. And Jake's a part of that, huh? I asked bitterly. Her face hardened, and she stepped back. Believe what you want. I've told you the truth. But she hadn't. Not really. Her words danced around the questions I needed answers to, leaving me more confused and angry than ever. After she left for work, I sat in the silence of our kitchen, staring at the spot where she'd been. I didn't know what to believe anymore. The tracker, the texts, her behavior, it all painted a picture I didn't want to see. But until I had concrete proof, I was stuck in limbo, drowning in doubt and distrust. I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I called Marie. She picked up on the third ring, her voice sharp and professional. Marie speaking. This is Stan, I said, my heart pounding. Lucy's husband. There was a pause, and then she said, What can I do for you, Stan? I need to know what's really going on, I said. Lucy's been acting differently ever since she started at your firm, and I can't shake the feeling that you and Jake are part of the reason why. Marie chuckled, low and almost mocking. Stan, with all due respect, Lucy's behavior is none of your business. She's an adult, and she's making choices for her career. If you can't handle that, maybe you should take a hard look at yourself. Her words stung, but I pressed on. Is there something going on between her and Jake? That's a question for Lucy, not me, she said coolly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting to attend. She hung up, leaving me with nothing but more questions and a sinking feeling in my gut. After my unsettling conversation with Marie, I felt more isolated than ever. Lucy's behavior had shifted dramatically since starting her new job, and the secrecy surrounding her relationships with Jake and Marie was tearing me apart. I needed concrete answers, not just evasions and half-truths. Determined to uncover the reality, I decided to take a day off work to follow Lucy. It felt wrong, like a betrayal of trust, but I couldn't ignore the gnawing suspicion any longer. I waited until she left the house, then discreetly tailed her car, maintaining enough distance to avoid detection. Lucy drove to a part of town we rarely visited, a neighborhood known for its upscale boutiques and cafes. She parked near a chic, unmarked building and entered without hesitation. I waited for a few minutes before approaching, noting the discreet sign indicating it was a private wellness club. Curiosity piqued, I entered the lobby, pretending to inquire about membership. The receptionist was polite but firm, explaining that the club was by invitation only. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of Lucy through a partially open door, laughing with Jake and Marie in what appeared to be a lounge area. My heart sank. This wasn't a work meeting, it was something more intimate, more exclusive. I left the building, my mind racing with possibilities. That evening, I confronted Lucy again. I followed you today, I admitted, watching her reaction closely. She stiffened, eyes narrowing. You what? I saw you at that private club with Jake and Marie. What's going on, Lucy? This isn't just about work, is it? She took a deep breath, avoiding my gaze. It's not what you think, Stan. Marie introduced me to this exclusive network of professionals. It's a chance to advance my career, to make connections that matter. And Jake? I pressed. Where does he fit into all this? Lucy hesitated, then said, He's part of the network. He's been mentoring me, helping me navigate this new environment. Why all the secrecy? I asked, frustration boiling over. Why couldn't you just tell me? Because I knew you wouldn't understand, she snapped. You've been so suspicious, so controlling. I needed something for myself, something separate from us. Her words cut deep, leaving me speechless. The woman I thought I knew had become a stranger, entangled in a world I couldn't penetrate. That night, I slept on the couch, the chasm between us growing ever wider. Trust had been shattered, and I didn't know if we could ever rebuild it. The days after our last confrontation were tense and quiet. Lucy barely spoke to me, and when she did, it was clipped and defensive. I tried to let it go, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw her laughing with Jake at that club, like she didn't have a care in the world. One evening, while Lucy was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the counter. The name on the screen made my heart sink, Jake. Without thinking, I picked it up and read the message, "Tomorrow night, same place. Marie says we're moving forward." Moving forward? With what? When Lucy came back, I confronted her. "What's tomorrow night about, Lucy? What are you and Jake moving forward with?" She froze, clutching her towel. "Were you looking at my phone?" "Don't turn this around on me," I snapped. "What are you hiding?" Her face hardened. "It's nothing. Just a work thing." "Another lie," I said, my voice cold. "I can't do this anymore, Lucy. If you can't be honest with me, maybe we need to rethink what we're doing here." For the first time, her composure cracked. "Stan, you don't understand." "You're right," I cut in. "I don't. Because you won't let me. I can't keep being in a marriage where I feel like a stranger." She didn't respond, just stood there as I walked out of the room. That night, I packed a bag and left. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. I ended up crashing at my friend Mike's place. He didn't ask many questions, just handed me a beer and told me I could stay as long as I needed. It was exactly what I needed, space to think without Lucy's shadow looming over me. The next day, I decided to dig deeper. I had already crossed lines I never thought I would, so I called a private investigator. It felt extreme, but I needed answers. If Lucy wasn't going to give me the truth, I'd find it another way. The PI was efficient. Within a few days, he sent me photos and a report. Lucy had met Jake again at that same private club. There were no pictures of anything explicit, but the body language between them spoke volumes. At one point, she leaned in close, her hand brushing his arm as they laughed. It was a gesture I knew too well, a sign of comfort and connection. That evening, Lucy called me. It was the first time she'd reached out since I left. "Stan," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "Can we talk?" "About what?" I replied flatly. "I miss you," she admitted. "I don't like how things are between us." "Then tell me the truth," I said. "About Jake." "About everything." There was a long silence. Then she whispered, "It's not what you think." "Then what is it, Lucy?" I pressed. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've checked out of this marriage." "I'm trying to figure things out," she said, her voice breaking. "Please just come home so we can talk." Her words tugged at me, but the images from the PI's report flashed in my mind. "Not until I know the whole story," I said and hung up. I didn't go home that night. I didn't know if I ever would. The truth I was searching for was coming into focus, but I wasn't sure I was ready to face it the following morning. I decided I'd had enough of the back and forth. I wasn't going to let Lucy keep dodging my questions while pretending everything was fine. With the report from the PI in hand, I drove back to the house, determined to get the truth out of her. Lucy was in the kitchen when I walked in. She looked surprised to see me but didn't say anything right away. "We need to talk," I said, setting my bag down by the door. She nodded slowly. "Okay. I've been wanting to." "No," I cut in. "This time, you're actually going to answer me." I pulled out the photos from the PI's report and laid them on the counter. Her face went pale when she saw them. "What the hell is this, Lucy?" Her hands trembled as she picked up one of the photos. "You hired someone to follow me?" "I did," I said bluntly. "Because you've been lying to me for months. So now's your chance to tell me the truth. What's going on with Jake?" She put the photo down, her lips pressing into a tight line. "Stan, it's not what it looks like." "Don't," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "Don't insult me by saying that. Just tell me the truth. Are you sleeping with him?" "No," she said quickly, tears welling in her eyes. "It's not like that." "Then what is it?" I pressed, my voice rising. "Because from where I'm standing, you've been sneaking around with him, lying to me, and treating me like an idiot." She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. "I didn't mean for it to get this far." "What does that mean?" I demanded, my chest tightening. "You didn't mean for what to happen?" She finally looked up, her face streaked with tears. "I've been spending time with Jake, but it wasn't supposed to be like this. Marie said. She said I needed to explore my options. She said I was limiting myself by staying in one place, in one relationship. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. So what, Lucy? You're trying to see if there's something better out there. No, she exclaimed, shaking her head. It wasn't about that. I got caught up in it. The attention, the excitement. It made me feel alive again. And I didn't? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer. Her silence said more than words ever could. I stared at her for a long moment, the weight of everything crushing down on me. I can't do this anymore, Lucy. Her eyes widened. What do you mean? I mean I'm done fighting for someone who isn't fighting for me, I said, grabbing my bag. You need to figure out what you want, but don't expect me to sit around waiting. I walked out, slamming the door behind me, not knowing if I'd ever come back after leaving the house. I drove aimlessly for hours, replaying Lucy's words over and over. Marie said I needed to explore my options. That sentence stuck in my head like a thorn. She hadn't denied the betrayal, only tried to justify it. That night, I stayed at Mike's place again. He didn't push me for details, but I finally opened up. I think it's over, I admitted quietly. She's not the person I married anymore. Mike nodded, handing me another beer. You've done everything you could, man. Sometimes, people just grow apart. His words gave me a strange sense of relief. I wasn't ready to make a final decision, but for the first time, I started thinking about life without Lucy. What it would mean to start over, to focus on myself instead of fighting for a relationship that felt one-sided. The next day, Lucy texted me, "Can we talk? Please." I stared at the message for a long time before replying, "I need time." I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear, I couldn't keep living like this. It was time to take a step back and figure out what I wanted. After leaving the house, I drove aimlessly for hours, replaying Lucy's words over and over. Marie said I needed to explore my options. That sentence stuck in my head like a thorn. She hadn't denied the betrayal, only tried to justify it. That night, I stayed at Mike's place again. He didn't push me for details, but I finally opened up. I think it's over, I admitted quietly. She's not the person I married anymore. Mike nodded, handing me another beer. You've done everything you could, man. Sometimes, people just grow apart. His words gave me a strange sense of relief. I wasn't ready to make a final decision, but for the first time, I started thinking about life without Lucy. What it would mean to start over, to focus on myself instead of fighting for a relationship that felt one-sided. The next day, Lucy texted me, "Can we talk? Please." I stared at the message for a long time before replying, "I need time." I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear, I couldn't keep living like this. It was time to take a step back and figure out what I wanted. About a month after I left, Lucy showed up at Mike's place unannounced. I was out back, fixing a broken fence panel for him, when I heard her voice calling my name. I froze for a moment, my heart pounding. I hadn't seen her since that last confrontation, and part of me wasn't sure I was ready. Still, I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked around to the front yard. There she was, standing by her car, looking smaller than I remembered. She was holding a folder in one hand and wringing the other nervously. "Stan," she said softly. "Can we talk?" I glanced back toward the house, where I could see Mike watching from the window. He gave me a nod, as if to say, "Your call." I sighed, gesturing toward the steps. "All right. Let's talk." We sat on the porch, the silence between us heavy. Finally, she handed me the folder. "I've been seeing a counselor," she said. "I've been trying to understand why I did what I did. Why I let everything spiral the way it did." I opened the folder and saw a few pages of notes, some scribbled affirmations, and a business card for a therapist. It was unexpected. "I know I hurt you," she continued, her voice trembling. "I got caught up in this world where success meant everything, and I stopped appreciating what I had. I let people like Marie and Jake influence me in ways I shouldn't have. But I swear, nothing physical happened with Jake. It was just attention, validation, and it was wrong." Her words hung in the air. Part of me wanted to believe her, but another part couldn't forget the lies, the secrecy, and how distant she'd been. "Why didn't you tell me any of this sooner?" I asked quietly. "I was scared," she admitted. "Scared of how you'd react, scared of admitting to myself that I was losing you. But I don't want to lose you, Stan. I want to fix this. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. But it was faint, buried under layers of hurt and mistrust. "Lucy, I don't know if we can go back to how things were," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You broke my trust, and that's not something that's easy to rebuild." "I know," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "But I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Therapy, counseling, whatever you need. Just please, don't give up on us." I looked away, staring out at the street. I wanted to believe her, but could I? Was it possible to rebuild something so broken? Or was it too late? We talked for hours that day. Lucy opened up about her insecurities, her need to prove herself, and how she let herself get swept up in a lifestyle that didn't align with who she wanted to be. She apologized, truly apologized, for the lies and the hurt she'd caused. But even as she poured her heart out, I couldn't shake the fear that it might happen again. That she might get caught up in another whirlwind of ambition and leave me behind. That night, I stayed at Mike's again, but Lucy's words lingered in my mind. Maybe she was sincere, or maybe it was too little, too late. Either way, I knew I couldn't rush my decision. If we were going to try to work things out, it would have to be on my terms. And I wasn't sure I was ready to make that call the week after Lucy and I had that long conversation on Mike's porch. I still hadn't made up my mind. Her words had been sincere, and I could tell she genuinely regretted what she had done, or at least the pain it caused me. But regret alone couldn't erase the damage. I needed more than apologies. I needed to feel like I could trust her again. And honestly, I wasn't sure that was possible. I asked her for space, and to her credit, she respected that. She kept her distance, only texting occasionally to say she was thinking of me or asking how I was doing. There were no more pleas, no guilt trips, just quiet, consistent reminders that she still cared. One evening, I found myself sitting in Mike's backyard, staring at the fading sunset. I thought about everything Lucy and I had built together, our history, the love we once shared, the promises we made. I also thought about the betrayal, the lies, and the cold, distant person she had become over the past few months. Finally, I asked myself the hardest question: could I ever forgive her? The answer wasn't easy. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't just about letting go of anger, it was about rebuilding something stronger. And for that to happen, both of us had to be all in. I couldn't do it alone, and neither could she. The next day, I called Lucy and asked her to meet me at a park we used to visit when we were younger. It was quiet when I arrived, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the grass. Lucy showed up a few minutes later, looking nervous but hopeful. "Thanks for meeting me," she said softly, sitting down on the bench beside me. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," I began. "About us, about everything that's happened." Her hands fidgeted in her lap, but she didn't interrupt. "I won't lie," I continued. "I'm still hurt. I'm still angry. But more than that, I'm scared. Scared of putting my trust in you again and having it broken." "I understand," she said quietly, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm not ready to come back," I said, my voice steady. "Not yet. But I'm willing to try, if you are. If you're serious about fixing this, about earning back my trust, then I'll meet you halfway." Her tears spilled over, and she nodded quickly. "I'll do whatever it takes, Stan. Therapy, counseling, whatever you need. I just want to make things right." We sat there for a long time, talking about the road ahead. It wasn't going to be easy, and I told her that. Trust takes years to build, seconds to break, and who knows how long to repair. But for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. As we walked back to our cars, Lucy reached for my hand. I let her take it, her grip tentative and unsure. It wasn't a reconciliation, not yet. But it was a start. For now, that's where things stand. We're not back to normal, and we may never be. But we're trying. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Thanks for sticking with me through all of this, Reddit. Writing this out has helped more than I can say. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that relationships are messy and complicated, and sometimes, the only way forward is to face the mess head-on. Wish me luck.